The royals are expected to understand that party politics and individual politicians are off-limits for public comment. The monarchy's website states, "As head of state, the Queen has to remain strictly neutral with respect to political matters. By convention, other members of the family have to follow suit. However, the Prince of Wales has sometimes crossed this line and has been accused of meddling in political matters." According to extracts from Alastair Campbell's diary, published in The Guardian in 2011, former Prime Minister Tony Blair was incredibly frustrated with Prince Charles' behaviour during his time in Downing Street. Mr. Blair felt the heir to the throne overstepped the constitutional boundaries previously observed by the royal family by trying to influence government policy, Mr. Campbell claimed. The ex-Labour leader was said to have become exasperated by the prince's interventions over the ban on fox hunting, the foot and mouth crisis, GM foods, and the abolition of hereditary peers. Mr. Blair's concerns grew so great that he even raised them with the Queen, Mr. Campbell suggested in his diaries. In an entry about a meeting between Mr. Blair and the Prince, Mr. Campbell wrote, "While publicly we stayed supportive, Tony Blair said Charles had to understand there were limits to the extent to which they could play politics with him. He said it was 90 minutes of pretty hard talk, not just about hunting." In Power and Responsibility, The Alastair Campbell Diaries, Volume 3, the former spin doctor also recalled a string of incidents in which the prince strayed into politics, to Mr. Blair's apparent irritation. He claimed that in 2001, the former Prime Minister was angered by the prince's deeply unhelpful interventions over the foot and mouth crisis. Writing on March 16 that year, Mr. Campbell said, "Tony Blair said he knew exactly what he was doing." He also asked whether Charles had ever considered help when 6,000 jobs were lost at Corus, the steel manufacturer. He said this was all about screwing us and trying to get up the message that we weren't generous enough to the farmers. In another episode in 1999, Mr. Blair allegedly resented a letter from the prince which challenged plans to ban fox hunting and declared that hereditary peers, most of whom were abolished by Labour that year, had much to offer. Mr. Campbell wrote that the prince had, menacingly, said, "We don't really want to be like the Continentals, now do we?" The same year, following a newspaper article by the prince condemning GM foods, Mr. Blair apparently raised his concerns with the Queen. On June 1, 1999, Mr. Campbell wrote, "Tony Blair saw the Queen and seemingly didn't push too hard Charles, but he was very ***** off, especially once it became clear that they, Charles's officials, were emphasizing he had thought through the consequences." Immediately after the publication of Mr. Campbell's diary entries, the former Prime Minister confirmed that he did voice critical remarks of the Prince in private. However, he said he found their discussions immensely helpful. He wrote, "A Prime Minister may sound off from time to time, especially when sensitive discussions with members of the royal family leak into the papers, in the middle of some high-profile issue. However, I want to make it clear that I always found my discussions and correspondence with Prince Charles immensely helpful. I thought he had a perfect right to raise questions and did so in a way that was both informative and insightful. So I welcomed his contributions, and have no doubt he will continue to raise issues with the new government as he is entitled, and indeed it is his job to do, and that they will also find it helpful." Mr. Blair returned to the limelight earlier this week, as he passionately condemned U.S. President Joe Biden's decision to withdraw troops from Afghanistan. In his first public comments on the crisis since the Afghan government collapsed last weekend, Mr. Blair criticized the U.S. motives for the withdrawal as imbecilic and driven not by grand strategy but by politics. He wrote in a wide-ranging article published on his institute's website, "The abandonment of Afghanistan and its people is tragic, dangerous, unnecessary, not in their interests and not in ours. We didn't need to do it. We chose to do it. We did it in obedience to an imbecilic political slogan about ending the forever wars, as if our engagement in 2021 was remotely comparable to our commitment 20 or even 10 years ago." Related articles: Obama's unfortunate gift to Queen. What on earth am I going to do? Queen's concerns over Prince Harry's overexposure laid bare Edward's heartfelt admission about Kate. Never going to be easy.